Welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news from a Taiwan perspective. I'm Albert Cho. During the Israel-Hamas conflict, the U.S. deployed the Giro R-4 class aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean. In October, the U.S. held a naval interception exercise with Japan and South Korea. The USS Theodore Roosevelt, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, visited South Korea's Busan port. U.S. aircraft carriers have rarely traversed the Taiwan Strait in the past 2 decades. In this episode, we discuss the modern relevance and geopolitics of U.S. aircraft carriers. Joining us today are Otto Dean, Emeritus Professor of Diplomacy at the National Chengchi University, and Charles Wu, Professor and Chair of Department of Diplomacy at the National Chengchi University. A very warm welcome to both on the show. There are 11 U.S. aircraft carriers in total, with 3 currently undergoing maintenance and 6 actively deployed. The Taiwan Strait is narrower in the northern parts and wider in the southern parts. The narrowest point spans 126 kilometers, and the water depth is around 70 meters. So for Professor Dean, operating aircraft carriers in this region poses challenges with the strait's narrowness, making ships vulnerable to PLA missile attacks. So would their positioning in eastern waters provide assistance to Taiwan during heightened cross-strait tensions?
Well, if we can, I guess we can take a look at what happened in the previous years. In 1995-96 Taiwan Strait crisis, U.S. deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the Taiwan Island area. When China launched the missile attack, missile exercise, falling into the water area in the both ports, in the Kaohsiung and the Keelung, U.S. just monitor and watch, did not have any kind of reaction for that. So for me, on the one hand, we see in the U.S.-China, although they are the 2 major powers in the world, but both sides try to avoid to directly have military confrontation with each other. So it means that the aircraft carrier sent to the Taiwan Strait area is only to play a monitor role or watching role, and if necessary, provide some kind of a non-combatant function. For instance, probably provide intelligence, maybe to Taiwan. So this is the first action, the function. Second is that maybe I would say kind of psychological deterrence, because in 1995-96 Taiwan Strait crisis, during that times, China is much weaker, was much weaker than the United States in the naval force. So means that if U.S. send the aircraft carrier to the Taiwan area, it can provide some kind of psychological assistance to Taiwan, and the psychological deterrence to China. Say, okay, we are here, and just be careful, be prudent. Don't rigorous. Take any kind of irresponsible action, so on and so forth. So I would say it's most of the psychological or political functions, or symbolic functions.
Okay, Professor Wu, so do you think the Taiwan Strait is too narrow and also too shallow for U.S. carrier to travel, and maybe travel through is still okay, but it would make it difficult for the carriers from the U.S. side to operate in the Taiwan Strait? What's your knowledge of this?
I think it's fine for the aircraft carrier, especially United States aircraft, to carry to go through the waters. However, it's very difficult for submarines because 70 kilometers depth is not enough for a submarine to operate. So, like what I say, if there will be any kind of, because we talk about the submarine functions with the aircraft carriers altogether. So, if there's really a battle in the very narrow strait, I think only the ships and also amphibious attacks and also the air forces will be functional. Submarine will have huge problems.
Okay, so a nice follow-up to your answer is that, so what particular military preparation and plans need to be taken into account? For example, should the fighter jets carry out civilians missions around the carrier? Is it essential for submarines, as you mentioned, to operate beneath the carrier to address potential underwater threats? Maybe you can continue this.
Yeah, usually when aircraft carriers come out, it doesn't come out alone. It goes with we call the Carrier Strike Group, the CSG. And it contains, like for example, the destroyers, several different types of ships, and also the aircrafts. For example, the maritime patrol aircraft, the U.S. use P-8 Poseidon. Okay, is for the maritime surveillance. And also we call another one is airborne early warning control. For example, is E-2 Hawkeyes. Those two aircrafts usually play a very important role on surveillance for the aircraft carriers and also the CSG groups. For the submarines, it's also very important because submarine provide a kind of deterrence and also a huge kind of power functions for the aircraft carrier, because first it go underneath, so it provide anti-submarine warfare systems. For example, they can detect or kind of track or find out the rivalry's submarines and destroy it. A second thing, they can provide we call the intelligence surveillance functions. For example, they can also track and also detect if there's any kind of rivalry ships coming very close, and also provides kind of what we call because it's very hard to find out the submarines. So they provide kinds of deterrence effects for the enemy's naval forces.
Right. So Professor Ding, so kind of the question goes to you is that do you think that it is relatively unwise for U.S. carrier to go through Taiwan Strait if there's an attack on PLA? You think that this is not a right spot for the U.S. carrier to do?
Yeah, definitely. As we all talk about, the Taiwan Strait is quite narrow. So if my memory is correct, the U.S. aircraft carrier have never been passing the Taiwan Strait. Most of the time, passing east of Taiwan in the Pacific Ocean areas. If this is applied to United States, definitely also apply to the Chinese Navy, PLA Navy. No doubt, if we read from the media, and sometimes China's aircraft carrier passing the Taiwan Strait, but it's peacetime. To emphasize that it's peacetime. And I would say this kind of a deliberate action taken by China to send a signal to Taiwan and say, hey, we have an aircraft carrier, so you got to be watch and you got to be prudent. So I don't think means that I don't think even if in a war between Taiwan and China is as a big if, I don't think China will deploy its aircraft carrier in the Taiwan Strait, because it's extremely dangerous for the PLA to do this kind of deployment.
Okay, so it goes both sides, because we know that there's a carrier from the United States, but also from PLA. So probably, as you mentioned, they would avoid to position themselves in Taiwan Strait. Okay, so the follow-up part, we kind of go back to the historical backgrounds of this aircraft carrier. It goes to Professor Wu. Like what Professor Ding mentioned, that carriers serve as a symbolic or political function. Sometimes, actually most of the time, rather than a substantive military one in the context of the Taiwan contingencies. Could you elaborate on the events involving the two U.S. aircraft carriers during the 1996 missile crisis in Taiwan Strait, when you were probably in high school, right?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. Yeah. But I still remember at that time the Beijing the fire missiles, two to the off coast of Kaohsiung port, and one to the off coast of Keelung port, and also kind of doing the military exercise along the Fujian province's coast. At the time, it created a huge impact on the cross relations stability, and also give the international society a huge kind of tensions. People worry about probably there will be a war. And the Washington, D.C., they sent out two aircraft carriers. One is Nimitz, one is USS Independence, the cruise across Taiwan Strait. First thing we need to know that these two aircraft, they only provide, we call the symbolic or political function, because based on the United States one China policies, they also maintain, we call it strategic ambiguities. It was very difficult and it's impossible for the United States to engage, we call directly engage the military exercises or military activities against the PLA. So 1995-96, the two aircraft carriers, actually they provide a deterrence effect. They want to give a huge and also very important signal to PLA and also Beijing. You better not to move one step forward, because if you move one step forward, there will be a change of status quo. United States probably will engage and help Taiwan to fight back. So this is one thing we need to know. Aircraft carrier, they provide. We know that they can have United States is the first country, and also the biggest country, can do the power projections. They have 11 aircraft carriers right now. However, for Taiwan Strait, the aircraft carriers, they provide more political functions than real power functions.
As I remember, in the aftermath of the 1996 crisis, the so-called middle line between the two political entity, Taiwan and China, was designated as a sort of like a consensus across the borders, across the strait. So, Professor Dean, as you remember, any kind of unique thing you would like to mention about the aircraft carriers from that was under the Clinton administration, right?
So-called median line between Taiwan and China is not a treaty or so-called the written agreement, formalized agreement. It's just kind of a tacit agreement, and unilateral imposed from the United States, from Washington D.C. But these days, the Chinese military vehicles, including aircraft, including the fighter jets and the warships, frequently crossing the median line. But the question is that what the aircraft carrier can do, particularly for the U.S. aircraft carrier deployed in the east of the Taiwan Strait. And also we mentioned a little bit earlier that in case of military conflict in the Taiwan Strait, China definitely will not deploy its aircraft carrier in the Taiwan Strait. So that means that in case of a real conflict, then Taiwan Strait will be an area that no major so-called surface combatant, probably only the fighter jets in the airs. So that's why we can see in last April when President Tsai Ing-wen transited in California, China also launched the military exercise. But this time, China deploys aircraft carrier in the southeast of Taiwan, not southwest. And there's no doubt, China knows. This means that China knows quite well, it's totally useless to have the aircraft carrier deployed in the Taiwan Strait. Instead, they are doing all kinds of experiment and test. For instance, deploy aircraft carrier and its so-called striking groups in the southeast of Taiwan. They are probably try to emulate or do modeling how what if they launch operations against Taiwan from southeast part of the Taiwan. So I guess the aircraft carrier have totally useless if deployed in the Taiwan Strait. Instead, in any kind of potential conflict in the Taiwan Strait, it's totally impossible for any kind of a major surface or undersea, the so-called surface combatant vehicle or undersea submarine operation lies in the Taiwan Strait. It's totally impossible.
Okay, just one additional information to your comments was that the middle line was actually broken by PLA in recent years. Now the airplane, the fighter jet sorties from PLA does not even recognize this middle line. They crossing the line a lot and to harass Taiwan. Okay, now let's kind of change the topic somewhat in comparing the Chinese, the PLA aircraft carriers with the United States aircraft carriers. The quality and the quantity of U.S. carriers surpass those of China's carriers. Take for example the Ford class carrier and the Fujian 003 carrier. The former is larger in terms of length, beam, and the displacement. So the PLA is rapidly advancing and may eventually match the capability of U.S. carriers. Even now, the status quo still, the United States still ahead, but it's hard to say in the future. So why is China also building carriers if, like Professor Dean mentioned, at best serve as a symbolic role instead of any kind of substantive? Maybe Professor Wu can answer this question.
This is a great question. Why China start to build the aircraft carriers? Like what I said, PLA Navy. In the very early beginning, they can only have like ships patrol their coast. However, they're facing a huge challenges and threats against the South China Sea, and they need to protect their so-called their islands. So the regional power projections is the very first reason why the PLA Navy start to build aircraft carrier, Liaoning, Shandong, and the Fujian. And then if you think about the power projections, they need to at least move their aircraft assets overseas, then let the aircraft can fight the air force, air battles. So and also aircraft carrier can maintain certain couple of days on the oceans and protect their so-called territories. And second thing, the scholars and also observers mentioned that why they want to build we call the blue water navy, including the aircraft carriers. One very important thing is they want to secure their oil land. We know starting from 2013, Xi Jinping mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative. They know how to secure their energies because they know who can secure energy, who can win the final battle against the hegemons. So this is one thing they want to enhance their maritime presence. The very important and very key issue and key factors to enhance the maritime security is building the aircraft carriers. So these are two very important reasons they want to build aircraft carriers. However, against Taiwan, aircraft carriers provide very important other functions. For example, like I mentioned, the power projections, they can move their aircraft assets to the east coast of Taiwan. So they can initiate an attack
Taiwan
from the back. And second thing, also they can provide amphibious assault support. For example, the aircraft carrier can provide air cover, strike capabilities to protect and support amphibious landing forces. And third thing, very important, is the strategy of naval blockade. One very important strategy the PLA probably use against Taiwan is the blockade Taiwan. They blockade Taiwan and let the economy go downturn. People start losing the confidence. And aircraft carrier can sustain and maintain this kind of functions.
All right, Professor Ding, Professor Wu mentioned a lot of the potential capabilities of the PLA carriers against Taiwan in case of Taiwan contingency. So, on the parts of Taiwan, what are we supposed to do if there's a war across the strait and PLA carriers is aimed to attack Taiwan, whereas on the other hand, as you mentioned, the U.S. carriers, probably would hesitant to step in, especially in the Taiwan Strait. What else can we do to protect ourselves?
2 or 3 years, we see China more launch employ on much more on the so we call the gray zone operation means that coercive, not directly so-called invade Taiwan or launch military operation against Taiwan. They took a kind of a coercive approach, gradually step by step and close to Taiwan's territory, 12 nautical miles, 24 nautical miles. So the challenge, if that is the pattern, and also we need to, there's a different assumption, how China will militarily handle so-called Taiwan issue. Maybe there's in the near short term, it seems the likelihood for China to launch the all-out invasion against Taiwan is quite low. So it means that in the near term, maybe let's say 2 to 5 years, maybe, then coercive approach may be the main approach taken by China. So it means that but the key question was how should we prepare, because such a wide spectrum of the operation, from the gray zone operation, coercive operation to all-out invasion. So on the one hand, maybe we need to continue to procure, for instance, some kind of advanced platform, for instance, F-16, or some kind of a major surface combatant ship, so on and so forth, so we can dispel. Because with this kind of a major platform, we can when China, approaching Taiwan, we can dispel, scramble and to the air and dispel. But on the other hand, we also need to prepare. What if China launches all-out invasion? So what we should do, I guess, is on the one hand, we also need to procure and give training to the pilots, the sailors, so on and so forth, soldiers. This kind of a coercive counter operation. Okay. But on the other hand, we should so-called asymmetric operation. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Ding, I also wonder if there were U.S. assistance like what it does to Ukraine and maybe Israel later, directly or indirectly, in case of, in our example, Taiwan's contingency. What's your prediction that what U.S. Military would do to Taiwan to protect it?
Well, actually, U.S. can do a lot at this stage. At least from reading from the media, we already know that the U.S. try to help train our soldiers because we have been in peace for 40 years. Frankly speaking, we really don't know how to fight, and we really don't know how to prepare a war. Now, we don't like war, but you probably need to make some preparation. For instance, we need to, 40 years, we have so-called, each factory has so-called civil defense teams to do the so-called firefighting, so on and so forth. So, no, U.S. have this kind of experience, train our soldiers, pilots, sailors, so on and so forth, and so-called how should we do the logistic support, and also how should we do the so-called reserve system and the mobilization system. So those are the experience we can learn from the United States, and the U.S. can teach us. Yeah.
All right, so that's more like a system-wise. What about you, Professor Wu? You think in case of the Taiwan's contingency, do you think the United States has any kind of unique or maybe unforeseeable so far for us equipment or training or any weapons provided to Taiwan to just protect ourselves against PLA's invasion?
Yeah, they start to do that little by little, gradually. Especially they want to provide Taiwan with, say, enough weaponry and missile stockpiles. So this right now they talk about how Taiwan need to build our own asymmetric warfare systems. We don't want like huge trunk, big tanks or fighter jets. We need like tons of missiles, bullets, stockpile in our streets somewhere, undercover, which we can use it, and we can maintain it, use it, and with trained military personnel. Also, now they also United States try to build a kind of exchange programs between two sides. They want to send American soldiers or generals to Taiwan to learn relevance knowledge in Chinese, and also want to build this kind of connections with Taiwanese societies. So I think the cooperation is very tight from different kind of channels, and they keep going on.
Okay. We heard of the term Porcupine strategy a lot, right? And in this episode, we talk about the aircraft carrier. That's a gigantic stuff, weapons, or it's a shipment. It's a ship on the ocean. But what about the Porcupine strategy? How is this perceived as a strategy that we in Taiwan should use as a tool, as an approach to combat the aircraft carrier attack from PLA? Maybe Professor Ding.
I guess concubine, if we translate into a so-called academic term, that is we call the denier. Means that you are much bigger and stronger than I do, but but I'm also prepared. So if we really want to take military operation against us, then you will not probability for you were not very high to prevail over us. So concubine means that we can deny your effort, so that you cannot successfully to launch your operation against us. Now you cannot successfully to occupy Taiwan, and if you do that, you will pay tremendous cost and effort
Okay, what about you, Professor Wu? Porcupine strategy, as some military experts in the States advise Taiwan to do it hardly, but also in this episode we talk about this, aircraft carrier thing. How can we perceive the whole picture in Taiwan?
One very important characteristics of Porcupine is we call the sustainability, sustainable, and also movable. This is the United States want Taiwan to build our next generation militaries. You need to be very sustainable, which means once they destroy one, they will come up with more. So, for example, they don't want us to buy any kind of M1A2 tanks. It's too big, and also because our geographical patterns, this is not good for M1A2 to fully use its functions. So some political observers even say M1A2 will become a sitting duck for when we use it on the West Coast. So also for the big ships, the United States doesn't want us to to buy any kind of big ships. They want movable, sustainable, and small ships which can carry more missiles to fight against, for example, the POS Navy. So this is one thing I don't know because I'm not from military sectors, how they try to manage. I mean, Taiwanese military divisions, how to manage, change the plans, and also change the logic is very important. And we need to start right now. And this is because we cannot do it in 1 year. We need several years. We also need a huge plans for our national defense blueprint.
Okay. Professor Wu, Professor Ding, thank you for both for your insightful opinions.
Thank you.
In this episode, we delve into the symbolic and substantive roles of aircraft carriers in the context of a Taiwan contingency. We also discussed how Taiwan needs to foster self-reliance both militarily and psychologically. Enjoy our show. Feel free to leave us a message and subscribe to Taiwan Talks. See you soon.